The elevator doors closed with a soft mechanical hum. Bruce Lee stood in the corner, his back against the mirrored wall, watching his own reflection fragment into infinite versions of himself. The fluorescent light above flickered intermittently, casting harsh shadows across the cramped metal box. He had just finished a late meeting on the 14th floor of a nondescript building, discussing choreography for an upcoming project. His mind was elsewhere, processing movements, angles. The endless geometry of combat transformed into cinematic language. The elevator descended slowly. 12th floor. 11th. At the 10th, it stopped. 3 men entered. They were large, filling the space with their bulk and the smell of alcohol mixed with cheap cologne. Bruce shifted slightly, creating more room, his movement economical, almost imperceptible. The tallest one, whom the others called Tommy, stood directly in front of the control panel, blocking it. His friends, Rick and Daniel, flanked him on either side. Tommy's eyes found Bruce in the mirror. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind that had nothing to do with friendliness. He was easily 6'3", broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that creaked when he moved. His knuckles bore old scars, the kind that came from hitting things repeatedly, carelessly. "Well, well," Tommy said, his voice filling the small space. "Look what we have here." Bruce remained silent, his breathing steady. He had learned long ago that words were often the first form of wasted energy. The elevator continued its descent. 9th floor. 8th. Rick, shorter but wider, with a wrestler's build, turned to face Bruce directly. His breath reeked of whiskey. "You're that kung fu guy from the movies, aren't you? The one who makes all those funny noises?" Daniel laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. He was lean, wiry, with the nervous energy of someone always looking for trouble. His hands moved constantly, fingers drumming against his thighs. "Yeah, the Chinese guy who thinks he can fight." The space seemed to shrink. Bruce was acutely aware of every dimension. 7 feet wide, 6 feet deep, 8 feet high. Metal walls on 3 sides, a sliding door on the 4th. The handrail ran along the back wall at hip height. The emergency stop button was blocked by Tommy's bulk. The ceiling had a maintenance hatch, locked from the outside. Every possible angle, every potential movement, mapped itself in his mind without conscious thought. 7th floor. The elevator slowed, then continued without stopping. "Nothing to say?" Tommy stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. In the confined space, he seemed even larger. "Maybe all that movie stuff is just dancing, huh? Just pretend fighting for cameras?" Bruce's reflection watched him from 3 angles. He saw what they saw. A smaller man, perhaps 5'7", wearing simple dark clothes. They saw an easy target, someone they could corner in this metal cage suspended between floors. They didn't see the thousands of hours of training compressed into his compact frame, the understanding of leverage and timing that made size irrelevant. "I'm just trying to get to the lobby," Bruce said finally, his voice calm, almost gentle. Tommy's smile widened. "Maybe we don't want you to get to the lobby. Maybe we want to see some of that kung fu up close." The elevator shuddered slightly, a mechanical hiccup that made the lights flicker again. For a moment, darkness swallowed them, and in that fraction of a second, Bruce felt the energy shift. Violence hung in the air like humidity before a storm. 6th floor. Rick cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp in the enclosed space. "You know what I think? I think it's all fake. Wire work and camera tricks. I bet in real life you couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag." Daniel moved to Bruce's left, cutting off another angle. They had done this before, Bruce realized. The positioning was too practiced, too coordinated. They knew how to use the elevator's dimensions to their advantage, how to create a trap with nowhere to run. "Gentlemen," Bruce said, keeping his voice level, There's no need for this. We'll reach the lobby in a few moments, and we can all go our separate ways." Tommy laughed, a low rumble that seemed to come from his chest. "Hear that, boys? He wants to go his separate way. Maybe we should help him separate. Maybe take him apart piece by piece, see how he's put together." The threat was naked now, hanging between them like a blade. Bruce's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but his weight had shifted almost imperceptibly, his center of gravity lowering, rooting him to the floor while maintaining the ability to move in any direction. The metal handrail pressed against his back, a reference point in space. 5th floor. "Last chance," Tommy said, stepping even closer. His shadow fell across Bruce's face. "Show us something. Do one of those kicks. Make those noises you make in the movies. Entertain us, and maybe we'll let you walk out of here." The elevator was a universe unto itself now, divorced from the normal world. Time stretched like taffy. Bruce could hear his own heartbeat, steady and calm, could feel the vibration of the cables through the floor, could smell the mixture of fear and excitement radiating from the three men. They wanted violence. They had been building toward it from the moment they entered. "I don't perform on command," Bruce said quietly. Something in his tone must have penetrated Tommy's alcohol-fogged brain, because for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. But pride and the presence of his friends pushed him forward. "Then maybe we'll make you perform," he said, reaching out with one massive hand toward Bruce's shoulder. 4th floor. The hand never made contact. What happened next occurred in the space of 2 heartbeats. But for those who understood movement, it was a lifetime of calculation compressed into explosive action. Bruce's body moved like water, finding the path of least resistance. He didn't retreat. There was nowhere to retreat to. Instead, he flowed forward and to the side, using the minimal space available with maximum efficiency. His right hand came up in a movement so small it was almost invisible, deflecting Tommy's reaching arm at the wrist, redirecting its force into the elevator wall with a metallic thud. In the same motion, Bruce's left hand shot forward, fingers extended, striking Tommy's throat with surgical precision. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to close his windpipe temporarily, sending him stumbling backward, gasping. Rick reacted with a wrestler's instinct, lunging forward to grapple, to use his superior weight to pin Bruce against the wall. But in the confined space, his size worked against him. Bruce dropped low, his legs sweeping out in a tight arc that caught Rick behind the knee. As Rick's balance shifted, Bruce rose, his shoulder driving into Rick's solar plexus, using the man's own momentum to send him crashing into Daniel. The elevator became a 3-dimensional chess game played at lightning speed. Every movement had to be precise, economical. There was no room for the wide, sweeping techniques of open combat. This was close-quarter survival, where inches mattered more than feet. Daniel, the quickest of the 3, managed to separate himself from Rick's falling body. He threw a wild haymaker, counting on the confined space to make it impossible to dodge. But Bruce didn't dodge. He redirected. His forearm came up at an angle, guiding Daniel's fist past his head and into the mirrored wall. The glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and Daniel screamed as his knuckles split open. Tommy had recovered enough to charge, using his size like a battering ram. In open space, the tackle might have worked. But Bruce used the elevator's dimensions against him. He pressed his back against the handrail and brought both feet up, planting them in Tommy's chest as he charged. The leverage was perfect. Tommy's own momentum, combined with Bruce's leg strength and the solid anchor point of the handrail, sent him flying backward into the control panel. The elevator lurched as Tommy's body hit the emergency stop button. They jerked to a halt between the 3rd and 4th floors, the lights flickering more violently. Rick was back on his feet, blood running from his nose where he'd hit the floor. He came in low this time, having learned from his first mistake. But the close quarters that had initially seemed like an advantage had become a prison. Every movement was telegraphed by the shift of weight on the elevator floor, every intention revealed by the reflection in the cracked mirrors. Bruce's hand shot out, catching Rick's reaching arm at the elbow and the wrist simultaneously. The joint lock was instantaneous, using Rick's own forward pressure against him. The arm hyperextended with an audible pop, and Rick collapsed, cradling the damaged limb. Daniel came from the left, trying to use the distraction. But in the fractured mirror, Bruce saw him coming from 3 angles at once. He pivoted on one foot, his elbow driving backward into Daniel's ribs with a crack like breaking wood. Daniel folded, the air driven from his lungs, and dropped to his knees. Tommy made one last attempt, pulling himself up from the control panel. But the fight had gone out of him. His throat was still damaged, his breathing ragged. When he raised his fists, they shook. Bruce stood in the center of the elevator, barely winded. Around him, 3 men lay in various states of defeat. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. "The elevator," Bruce said calmly, "is stopped. I'm going to restart it now." He stepped over Rick's prone form and pressed the emergency button again. The elevator shuddered back to life, continuing its descent. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. None of the 3 men moved to get up. They remained where they had fallen, nursing injuries both physical and psychological. The confident predators who had entered on the 10th floor were gone, replaced by broken men who had learned a harsh lesson about the difference between size and skill, between aggression and precision. Ground floor. The doors opened with a cheerful ding, revealing the marble lobby beyond. Bruce stepped out without looking back, leaving the 3 men to collect themselves. Behind him, he heard Tommy's ragged whisper, "What? What the hell was that?" Later, in the cool night air outside the building, Bruce reflected on what had transpired. The elevator had been a perfect metaphor for combat itself, a limited space where every choice mattered, where efficiency trumped power, where understanding the environment was as important as understanding technique. Those men had entered that metal box thinking its confines would trap him, make him helpless. They didn't understand that limitation could become liberation, that constraint could foster creativity. In that 7-by-6-foot space, he had found infinite possibilities for movement, had turned their advantage into their prison. Water, he had often thought, took the shape of its container while maintaining its essential nature. In a cup, it became the cup. In an elevator, it found every gap, every angle, every possibility that rigidity could not perceive. The 3 men had been rocks, solid and heavy and unchanging. He had been water, flowing around them, through them, finding the spaces they didn't know existed. The city stretched out before him, millions of lights creating their own constellations. Somewhere behind him, 3 men were probably still in that elevator, trying to understand what had happened. They had wanted to see Kung Fu, the movie version with its elaborate choreography and dramatic poses. Instead, they had encountered something far more fundamental. The simple truth that in combat, as in life, the one who adapts survives. Space, time, energy, movement. These were not abstract concepts but lived realities. In that elevator, compressed into half a minute of violence, these principles had expressed themselves with crystalline clarity. It wasn't about being stronger or larger or more aggressive. It was about understanding the nature of conflict itself, about becoming one with the environment rather than fighting against it. Bruce walked into the night, his footsteps quiet on the pavement. Behind him, the building stood like a monument to a lesson learned in the hardest way possible. In the morning, 3 men would wake with bruises and fractures, and a story they might never tell, about the night they trapped a dragon in a cage, only to discover that the cage had been theirs all along. The city hummed with its own rhythm, and Bruce moved through it like water through a landscape, adapting, flowing, always finding the path of least resistance that somehow led to the greatest effect.